So sensory sensitivities occur when the brain interprets sensory input differently or more intensely than expected. Things like your taste, smell, texture, temperature, these are all the senses that can be interpreted a bit differently for these people. And they can end up feeling very overwhelming or very unpleasant. And this leads them to avoiding specific foods or textures. Having these aversions would also affect the variety and quality of the foods people consume, and they may end up consuming less nutritious options. Not everyone can tolerate every single texture, and that is so fine. And I've accepted that it is not for me. So understanding textures and how people perceive them can help us guide them on better eating habits and also find a sustainable way that nutrition can work for them.
Welcome to Healthy Families with Healthy Food Guide. We're your hosts. I'm Managing Editor Jenny de Montalk.
And accredited practising dietitian Min Saw.
Okay, so in today's episode, we're going to delve into the wonderful world of food texture, what it is, what it does for our appetite and development, and why some people have sensory sensitivities to food texture and practical ways to tackle it. But before we begin, Min, I thought we'd get our brains firing with a bit of a quick fire question round. Are you keen?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go for it.
Cool. All right, so let's start. So answer these true or false, Min. Okay, number one, people with sensory aversions when it comes to food just need to try harder.
False. There is scientific research proving that actually there's something in the brain that impacts how we perceive these sensory or textures. So it's not just trying harder, it's also a lot of psychological aspect to it.
Okay, great. Right answer. Number two, past negative experience with food, such as choking, can cause food or texture aversions.
True. This is absolutely true. Past negative experiences can definitely shape how we perceive a type of food and carries that in our future experiences as well.
Yeah, makes sense, doesn't it? Okay, so last question. Soft foods are unhealthy.
This is a common misconception. It is false. It's just about finding the soft foods with the right nutrition value to match your requirements.
Okay, well done. That was great, Min. Thank you. So when we think about food, we often sort of focus on flavor, what we're in the mood for, what's going to nourish us for the day. Of course, everyone's got different taste preferences, whether you like savory or sweet food, spicy or bland. The variations in our palates are just as, varied, just as individual as we are, really. But food texture is often sort of an afterthought, especially if we don't have any really strong feelings around it. But the thing is, some of the most nutritious foods can be more challenging in texture. So if you think about things like crunchy vegetables, juicy fruit, things with pips and seeds, chewy whole grains, that sort of thing, dry nuts and seeds. So, Min, when we talk about food texture, what do we mean by that? And what role does texture play when it comes to the food we eat? What is food texture?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with what you're saying. Oftentimes when people think of food, they think of the flavor, so sweetness, saltiness, if it's sour or not. And oftentimes food texture is almost an afterthought unless you have an aversion to it. So let's start with food texture. What is food texture? So food texture refers to a physical characteristics of food that we feel in our mouths, and surprisingly as well as our touch, vision, and hearing. So when you crunch, you hear that crunch, and that also contributes to your perception of food texture as well. So like you mentioned, this includes the feeling of crunchiness, crispiness, creamy, chewy, juicy, grainy. And interesting fact, the most hated texture is actually sliminess and gooiness.
Oh, really?
In Australia.
Yeah.
It's not surprising. And so why does it matter? Like you mentioned, it is a major contributor to food enjoyment. along with taste, smell, and appearance. And also food texture also contributes to satisfaction. So how satisfied are you after having that meal? That is also a big factor. And now with food texture preferences, they are highly individualized and can be influenced by genetics, early food experiences, culture, or even exposure to different kinds of foods. And like you mentioned, with all these grainy foods and foods with seeds and pips, some people might be more have an aversion towards them. And that's because, many nutrient-dense foods naturally have these textures that some people find challenging. So it's these grainy or tough or even varying textures with each bite of the food you take. That can also create some challenge to some people with sensory aversions. So chewy whole grains, nuts and seeds, legumes, these are quite challenging foods. So as a result, having these aversions would also affect the variety and quality of the foods people consume, and they may end up consuming less nutritious options. So, and with these foods, they are more tough as well. They're a bit more chewy, a bit more grainy. It takes a bit longer to chew through. And this also contributes to eating slower. So it's not just the nutrition benefits of it, but also when you're having that food, also encourages you to eat a bit slower, chew through your food, and allow more time for that fullness cue to develop in your brain. So you feel fuller and then you feel more satisfied. And then you just don't end up, it's not as easy to overconsume, rather than if you were to only have soft foods, they are quite easy to chow down and keep going at it until you're overeating and you don't even feel full yet. Yeah, so that's the major differences.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was interested when you said that food texture can make a meal more satisfying. So that makes sense. So it sort of gets your, assume your whole digestive system going, because it creates saliva and gets your gastric acids going and so on. But also it's got time to send that signal to your brain to let you know, oh, yep, I've been eating and now I'm satisfied. So that's really interesting.
And the act of chewing also encourages, so there's this pathway between our jaw and our brain. So when you're chewing a lot, that's why we always encourage people to eat foods, especially for older adults, when they progress into, older age. We always encourage them to still have some chewy or tougher foods, just because that also helps improve reaction time. And it helps to keep them more alert as well. So that's why if you can have these tougher texture foods, it's always encouraged to have them.
Interesting. Really interesting. Okay, so with food texture, I know if you think kids tend to prefer softer textured food, and then they kind of develop a bit more of a tolerance for other textures as they mature. So why is that? Why do they start preferring sort of softer foods? I mean, obviously, to begin with, they don't have teeth, but but how is it that we sort of mature into a more diverse texture tolerance?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, obviously, because they don't have teeth yet. So it's just a natural path of life. And when you're a child, you prefer softer textures, and that's just a normal part of development. As we grow, oral skills and sensory experiences and confidence through repeated exposure of foods help allow us to tolerate and enjoy a wider range of textures. And one interesting research actually highlighted that kids prefer food that are smooth, and actually not just smooth, but free from particles. So as they develop, they can tolerate some tougher foods, but they are a bit more, hesitant to try foods with particles in them, and just because it feels a bit more foreign. So why do kids start with soft foods and then grow into tolerating more diverse variety of textures? That's because when we grow, the babies start developing jaw strength, and they actually have the ability to chew through these foods as they grow older as well. Another thing is exposure. Repeated exposure can also help children learn that different textures are safe and enjoyable, and that helps them accept the food over time. So definitely always encourage repeating exposure, especially in early childhood, with different foods to get them to tolerate these foods better. Another thing is brain development. So younger kids often prefer predictability. Now, soft foods are consistent in texture. When you bite into something soft, you can expect the same texture every time. Whereas if you were to bite in let's say a stick of celery, if you were to bite into it, depends on which part of the celery you're biting into, it may have different textures, different crunches, and different mouthfeel, and it's a bit more unpredictable, so that may cause them to be a bit more hesitant to try that. But as children mature, they become more and more comfortable with this variation of texture. Another thing is also that, like I mentioned, with repeated exposure helps them develop that comfort around trying new things as well. So as dietitians, we always encourage a gradual progression in trying new textures rather than forcing a child to try something new all of a sudden. We always encourage introducing this new texture with what we call safe foods, which is some food that you know your children already likes, already enjoys, and can comfortably have. Introducing that new texture with that food can give them the option to try something new without stressing them out too much. And with these opportunities, it allows the children to explore different textures and different foods at their own pace, which is absolutely what we encourage.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, you could have got to go at their own pace, but still challenge them a little bit. Don't just sort of let them avoid everything. Only stick with what. But it's, like at any age, you want to slightly push your comfort zone a little bit, and that's how we grow and develop and learn. That makes sense. And I suppose there's a little bit of a safety mechanism in there as well. When you're smaller, there will. Foods that are soft you're not going to choke on them or anything like that. So it's just as you get better at eating, you can start, handling things that are a little bit more risky, perhaps.
Absolutely. And also introducing these textures at the right age is really, really important as well. So definitely not just introducing them whenever you want. It's also observing your child's development progression and introducing in the way that's aligned to that as well.
Yeah. Okay. That's great advice. Thanks, Min. Okay. So again, with textural diversity, it's something, you kind of hear about chefs using and probably even unconsciously home cooks use to kind of increase how satisfying a meal is and how kind of yummy it is. But for some people, textures other than smooth or soft can be really off-putting. Can you take us through what's happening there? What are sensory sensitivities and who do they affect?
Like you mentioned, it's something chefs use a lot to create more sophistication in a meal or their food. And sensory sensitivities, what are they? So while many people enjoy these variety of textures in meals, others can find these variation in textures quite uncomfortable and quite distressing or difficult to eat. And that's just not them trying to be picky. It's actually rooted, for some people, it's actually rooted in their brain, how they process these sensory information, how these textures affect how they feel. So sensory sensitivities occur when the brain interprets sensory input differently or more intensely than expected. Things like your taste, smell, texture, temperature, these are all the senses that can be interpreted a bit differently for these people. And they can end up feeling very overwhelming or very unpleasant. And this leads them to avoiding specific foods or textures. And who can be affected, who are more prone to feeling this way? Research has shown that it's people with autism spectrum disorder, or with ADHD, attention deficit disorder, or even children and adults with sensory processing differences. So you don't have to be diagnosed, but not everyone, but some people can still have some degree of discomfort towards these senses. Also dysphagia, which is something that happens very commonly among older adults, especially for people who have experienced stroke or head and neck cancer, have undergone chemo and feel a bit weaker there. This is dysphagia essentially is difficulty chewing and swallowing, and that's why they may not be able to tolerate these textures as well. With autism and ADHD and all this difficulty processing senses, it's more about how the brain processes the sensory information. So for them, some people may prefer foods that are more predictable, more uniform, more consistent, because to them, that's what they're getting at. No surprises. That's what they're comfortable with. So they like that. They enjoy that. And when something like more variation comes in, that tends to freak them out a little bit, and they don't like that. Yeah, and most of the time, it's a bit of the mushy foods and slimy foods they tend to stay away from.
So, for instance, okay, I have a friend whose daughter has ARFID, for instance. So she's actually an avoidant. She's afraid of eating certain textures because, again, it's that predictability thing that she feels some foods are safe. But it comes right down to even as much as, so she likes rice crackers, for instance, but she'll need a particular brand of rice crackers and she'll know if they've changed something about the formula, that sort of thing. Do you think in some of these cases that they're actually, it's not just sort of an aversion, that they actually can notice more acutely differences in texture? Because I don't think I would notice if I not much had changed about a brand. They've just changed one thing about it. I don't think I would notice like right off the bat that something major has changed. Do you think that there is they're feeling more deeply,
Absolutely,
more attuned?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned, I think it ties back to how their brain processes these sensory information and how they may experience it a bit more intensely and overwhelmingly. So they may have a bite of something and instantly realize, they've changed their formula, just because they're feeling it a bit more. They're processing it, feeling the flavors and textures a bit more intensely. So something that has a more intense texture, they may feel like really, it may impact how they feel really, really, really big. And that's why they try to stay away from that and go for their more comfort textures they already know. That's going to impact how they feel, and tend to stray away from trying new things.
Yeah, that must be really tough. I think, just trying to put yourself in the head of somebody who's going through that, it's really, really challenging. And there must be a lot of anxiety around it, which, I think that's really tough.
Yeah. Yeah, with people like that, I always recommend working with a dietitian to still, balance out that preference for your texture, but also try to optimize your nutrition that way and find a balance between the two. And almost it's about setting the expectations of trying new things, or how gradual you want to try it, to kind of help them have that expectation in their head. So in that way, it doesn't really shock their, their brain or their taste buds, anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. It's a process that will take a lot of patience and a lot of bravery from the people who are dealing with these conditions as well. But a
lot of patience, a lot of bravery, a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, and persistence.
Cool. Absolutely.
Yeah. So just on that, I guess, are there any potential health risks associated with eating only smooth or soft foods? Is that sort of, can you just do that forever, or is it really quite important to bring in a wider variety of textures?
Well, ideally, in an ideal world, we want to have a variety of textures, a variety of fruits and veggies, all from the 5 food groups. But for people with more sensory aversions, like I mentioned, we find a balance between nutrition and preferences, because food is not just nutrition, it's also enjoyment. So if we're only forcing them to have nutritious foods which they don't enjoy, that's not health either. So we're always trying to find a balance between the two. And when you prefer soft foods, yes, it may limit your variety a little bit, but it's still not impossible to hit your daily requirements. When you do have more preferences to smooth and soft foods, this actually reduces your diet variety, obviously. So you can't have the tougher foods, and a lot of, like you mentioned in the beginning, the healthier, most nutritious foods are your, legumes, are stringy veg. These are textures that are not well tolerated. So it does reduce some sort of nutrient diversity over time. And soft foods also tend to be a bit lower in fiber and protein. So someone with preference to soft food may end up relying overly on refined grains, or strained or blended foods that could be lower in fiber and protein if not done correctly. So there are strategies to still manage that, and we can talk about that later. But with lower fiber and lower protein, this contributes to constipation, reduce gut health, and reduce satiety, and also maybe loss of muscle mass because we're not getting enough protein. And also reduces your chewing, your ability to chew. Like I mentioned before, chewing is also a really important of our lives just because it also helps improve reaction time. It keeps you more alert, and also enhances memory and learning. So the act of chewing actually helps you, be more alert and actually learn a bit more, which is a surprising fact that most people don't know.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And also, like I mentioned, with higher reliance on ultra-processed foods, these foods tend to be a bit lower in micronutrients. So if you're thinking about your cakes, your muffins, your chips, these are predictable textures and they are lower in micronutrients. They're not what we want to make up most of our diet with, just because they're also higher in added sugar, sodium, and fats. So we usually want to focus on more whole foods. Whole foods is the way to go. It's so fine to have these little snacks once in a while, but we do want to focus on whole foods in the bigger picture. Yeah. So definitely, if you're not careful when adopting a soft diet, there will be potential nutrition gaps.
Yeah. Okay. So that's quite tough. It's a challenge. So it's definitely something people do need to challenge themselves on. But yeah, again, doing it in a way that's safe and tolerable for everyone involved. Okay, so how do we support people with sensory sensitivities in this way then, to help them to eat a varied and healthy diet? Because obviously there is this anxiety there. There's, for all sorts of different reasons, or it can just be stressful, or for some people it's a kind of a preference thing, but for people with sensory sensitivities, it really sounds like they could just use that extra support. How do we do that?
So I think the first step is to recognize that sensory sensitivity is not picky eating. It's a genuine process that happens in people's brains, and validating that experience, understanding that that's where they're coming from, that's a really, really important first step, because that also understanding that force feeding will induce anxiety rather than helping them progress into different stages of acceptance. So definitely validating the experience of the person experiencing this feeling, and then work within safe foods first. So everyone has their own safe foods. So definitely start with that and slowly building up there from there. So it could be adding some extra foods to that safe foods, or it's modifying the texture of these safe foods to help them still feel like they're having something familiar, but also venturing to something a bit more uncomfortable, but trying something new. Something slightly thicker or slightly lumpier, and then building up from there, always gradually. And repeated exposure is the next step. So don't give up. Keep trying and slowly progressing into familiar textures to slightly more complex ones. So if you were to try to introduce some fruit to someone's diet, let's say pineapple. Pineapple is a crunchy, juicy fruit. That's something not everyone can tolerate. So if someone is having yogurt every day, so maybe start with blending that pineapple into the yogurt, and then slowly cutting the pineapple into small chunks into the yogurt, and then eventually progressing into larger chunks, and then eventually maybe having the pineapple by itself. And that way it's a slow and progressive step, and also helps people, I guess, accept that a little bit more. So with that repeated exposure, it's a non-pressure way to help people try different things at their own pace. So everyone's progression is also a bit different. One person may accept it a bit faster than the other. It's just up to trial and error and not giving up, and slowly, just keep trying to introduce that food into the diet. Another thing is also respecting boundaries. So even though you're trying to incorporate different types of foods. And I guess this is where trial and error comes in as well. You can perhaps you can try to tolerate this food, but you can't tolerate the other. So respecting that boundary, and also accepting that not every single texture needs to be accepted. The goal is to expand the variety of textures you're having, not to have every single texture in the world. So drawing that line, and also finding the balance between nutrition adequacy and flexibility, and texture preferences and enjoyment. Enjoyment is ultimately what we aim for. So that's really, really important. Also, like I mentioned, working with a dietitian or multidisciplinary support is also really, really valuable, just because an OT could help, occupational therapist could help with sensory processing, and then a speech pathologist could help with swallowing and oral motor skills, especially with dysphagia patients. And then obviously a dietitian can also help with matching the nutrition adequacy to texture and seeing what you need to have or how you can modify your foods to help you hit your nutrition requirements and be the healthiest self you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. And it does sound like there are people out there who are qualified, appropriately qualified, who can really help. So if you have that available to you, that's a really important step too, is get a team around you. But also just really supporting people going at a pace that they're comfortable with, and not aiming for perfection, but aiming for progress.
Absolutely.
Really good.
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
So what are some practical ways to make sure people with sensory sensitivity, or even just a preference for soft foods, can hit those nutrient targets? We've sort of talked about how we can support them, but what are sort of some real life foods or ways that we can just kind of make sure that they're getting what they need?
Well, the two biggest things I see missing when it comes to soft foods is, like I mentioned before, fiber and protein. But that doesn't mean they're not able to have that. It's just about how we incorporate that into their diet. So let's start with protein. Some soft protein options are, our Greek yogurt, milk, tofu, things like that, or smooth nut butters. These are great foods to add to someone's diet to boost that protein up if you were to prefer softer foods. Other things you can fortify your food with easily is protein powders. So if you were to have perhaps some blended oats, adding some protein powder can bump up that protein content in a day, but still keeping that soft texture. Other things are also like blended legumes. So hummus, lentil soups, a blended bean soup, things like that can also boost protein in your day. And these are also plant-based protein, which are amazing just because we know they're a powerhouse, and they also have really high amount of fiber, which is absolutely what we want. And they're also affordable sources of protein, which we always encourage to incorporate into your diet, given the economy and all the prices are rising. So blending those lentils into soups and sauces are a great way to bump up that protein and fiber content in your day as well. And another way to increase more fiber without changing too much texture is actually using more like chia seeds, to adding to your yogurts or puddings or oats to bump up that fiber, or going for avocado and changing the texture of avocado almost, so mashing it up or blending it up. And just, this is what we call fortification of food. So fortification just means bumping up that nutrition value with something else. So great foods to fortify are your soups, your smoothies. What else can we fortify? Your oats. So softer foods like that are really easy to fortify just because we can always blend something into it. And most of the time you won't even notice there's something else in it. And it also bumps up that nutrition value without you thinking too much about it, which is absolutely what we want. Another way to bump up that fiber in your day is to choose the softer, high fiber options. So if you were to, obviously whole grain bread is something we always recommend, but for someone with textural preferences, they may prefer white bread. So going for a high fiber white bread would be a really, really great option to bump up that fiber for someone with soft food texture preferences.
Well, there seem to be more of those at the moment. I've noticed there seem to be more of those cropping up, the white breads with the fiber added, or just higher fiber. Yeah,
and what they do is they essentially take the wheat and then they process it in a way and then fortify it back into the bread to bump up that fiber while still maintaining that soft, fluffy texture that we enjoy from white or wholemeal breads. And that really boosts that fiber content. I believe it's 4 times the fiber of usual white bread, and you don't even notice it, which is a great little way to sneak in that fiber into someone's diet.
Yeah, that's great.
And other high fiber options, like I mentioned, would be our oats, our porridge. These are really, really great. Cooking them down a little longer would give you that softer texture. So it's just also about playing around with the cooking methods of these foods and trying different things and see how you enjoy it.
Oh, that's really good practical stuff that people can kind of experiment with. I'm sure not everybody's going to go for every single one of them, but it's just something that you can do that kind of just boost that nutrition value up a little bit further.
Yeah, so it's a bit unconventional, blending things together. It's not something you typically find on a recipe book, but these are great strategies. And once you understand these are the protein sources, these are the fiber sources, okay, what can we do to, incorporate it into someone's diet and bump up that nutrition value of what they're having?
Yeah, absolutely. Really good stuff. What are your kind of key takeaways that you think people should take when it comes to food texture?
Well, my key takeaway is that there is no single perfect texture that everyone should be eating. Maybe in a perfect world, everyone will be getting 9 hours of sleep a night, eat a variety perfectly across the 5 food groups, drink enough water, exercise daily, and do all that. But this is not a perfect world, and everyone is so different. So we accommodate to that. And there is no single perfect texture that everyone should be having. Everyone's different. So the goal, I'm always saying in this podcast, is find the balance between nutritious foods that suit individuals' preferences and also nutritional requirements. So food texture is absolutely really, really important. So is flavor, food texture. However, food texture is more like an afterthought, which I think we should emphasize it a little bit more, just because it also plays an important role in food acceptance, enjoyment, and overall dietary quality as well. So understanding textures and how people perceive them can help us guide them on better eating habits and also find a sustainable way that nutrition can work for them as well.
Thank you for summarizing all of that. It's very, very interesting stuff. I think what I'm going to do after this podcast, Min, is go and challenge myself with some slimy food. Because, I think if we're telling people with sensory sensitivities they should be challenging themselves, perhaps we should too. And I'm sure I'll find something that I really like. So I'm down for the challenge.
Have you heard of natto?
No, I haven't. What's natto?
So it's a fermented Japanese soybean, and it is...
I have heard of it, sorry. Yeah,
it is the slimiest thing I've ever seen in my life. Have you tried it before?
No, I've heard of it, but I haven't tried it.
It takes a brave soul to try it. So you kind of mix it up with your chopsticks or your spoon or whatever, and it froths up almost, and it bubbles up. I'm not sure what's going on in there. I think it's a live bacteria kind of coming back into life and breathing, because it gets really frothy, and then you have it on your rice. So it's a slimy mix into your rice. And I've tried it. I've made myself try it a few times, and I still haven't been able to tolerate it. And this is why nobody's perfect. Not everyone can tolerate every single texture, and that is so fine. And I've accepted that it is not for me.
Okay, I know. I do know some people are absolutely mad on it, really love it. It's a kind of a breakfast thing, isn't it? Yeah. So I'd like to have the opportunity to give it a go, but I haven't come across it in real life yet. So
yeah,
one for the list. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. So thank you for listening to Healthy Families with Healthy Food Guide. For more practical science-based nutrition advice without the woo, pick up the latest issue of Healthy Food Guide or head to healthyfood.com.